Actor Brian Dennehy is on set today to talk about the movie Cocoon and aging and end-of-life anxiety with NYU psychologist Tony Bossis. Ahead on Science Goes to the Movies. Welcome to Science Goes to the Movies, a look at the stories of science and how they change our culture. I'm Faith Saley, and I am delighted today to be chatting with the wonderful sage actor Brian Dennehy. Thank you so much for being here, Brian. Yeah. And Brian and I are joined by Anthony Bossis, a clinical investigator studying effects of psilocybin on end-of-life anxiety, as well as a new study on the nature of religious experience. Welcome, Tony.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. You're sage too, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Today we're going to take a look back at the 1985 film Cocoon. Directed by Ron Howard, Cocoon tells the story of a group of Florida retirees who stumble on the resting place of an immortal race of aliens.
It is the mystery of an awesome secret. It is the miracle of everlasting life.
We'll never be sick. We won't get any older, and we won't ever die.
Beyond the innocence of youth and the wisdom of age lies the wonder of Cocoon.
That brings back memories, that movie. I saw it when I was 14. It was a huge hit. It revitalized and also launched careers. Brian, what do you remember of your time as that immortal alien?
Well, we had a great time. A wonderful bunch of people. It was the way movies used to be made, which is typically in the old days, you would fly in a company of actors and technicians, and you would be together at this location for 2 months, 3 months, which was the fun way of doing it. Because you created a new family, you got to know each other, and you hung out. And this was some family. Between Jessica Tandy and Hume Cronin and Maureen Stapleton.
Don Amici.
And Don Amici, one of the greatest gentlemen I've ever met in the business, and a whole bunch of other people.
And Ron Howard.
And Ronnie,
Ronnie, sorry.
Ronnie still looked like he was 16 at the time. He looks about 20 now, and a brilliant guy, and a guy who deserves his success as a director and as a writer and as a thinker.
In Cocoon, Ron Howard describes the aliens as creatures of light inside human-like skin. Would you say, Tony, that this is a good metaphor? I mean, in your
good description of me?
Yeah. Are you a light shining through merely human skin? I mean, would you say this is a good metaphor for end-of-life, working with the end-of-life anxiety, that you start to see people who think of themselves as beings inside of a body that they're going to release?
Yeah, if not specifically that, I think something related to that. I think what helps diminish end-of-life anxiety is the experience, and we saw this in our study, that we're not just bodies, that there's something more enduring within us, that there's something more complex about consciousness. And, at the mystic core of all the world's religions, there's that essence. We're not just a body, there's some other enduring experience that may even survive physical death. So that is a big part of the human experience in coping with death.
In 1985, when Cocoon was released, the amazing actors, Don Amici, Jack Gilford, and Jessica Tandy, were all about 76 years old. And at the start of the movie, the old folks are just hanging around. They're kind of waiting to die. And this alien life force brings them back to doing exciting things. The idea that healthy older people are just waiting to die, it seems really outdated now. And 76 seems almost way too young to start even thinking about death. So a question for both of you. Do you think our sense of old age has changed a lot, even since 1985?
I think it very much depends upon the individual. I mean, I know individuals and have known individuals who are going full speed, 82, 83, 84 years old, maybe dead in 6 months after that, but they never stop until, they're trying to go, trying to do something of value. But I would say probably a majority of the people just stop, I mean, I feel the same tendency now. I'll be 80 my next birthday, of wanting to stop.
You do want to stop.
Oh yeah. Well,
Why?
I don't want to stop. What I'm saying is, you feel that's part of the thing that happens to you when you get old. I'm doing stuff that I love to do, and if anybody offers, I'll do it because I love to do it. It's fun. Why not? But at the same time, I can also say to myself, yeah, wouldn't it be bad? How about just sitting down for a while? But of course, you don't want to do that for too long. Because
right.
then it's hard to get up.
What do you think, Tony?
I agree with that. There are individual differences as well, but I think as a culture, it's shifted clearly. When I was a kid, 50, 60 years ago, 76 seemed like, oh, he's the end of the line there. That's now a young age. It's considered, people are still doing incredible things into the 90s and beyond. So I think it's a culture that is shifting. And going back to your prior comment about death, death is the big teacher, right? How we think we die shapes how we live. If we lived forever, we wouldn't be living the same way, probably, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of shapes the whole existence to have that there.
When you meet with your patients for the psilocybin experiences, are they of all ages, or do they tend to be older patients who are near death?
No, so actually in this study, counterintuitively, many were very young. Cancer does not discriminate on how old you are, sadly. And so we had people in their 70s, of course, but we had people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s
and do you
with
find,
end-stage disease.
Do you find is there a difference between dealing with young people who are close to the end of their lives and older people, that older people have given thought to end of life simply because of their age?
Some do and some don't, right? Ernest Becker wrote that great book, Denial of Death, many years ago. It's kind of the human impulse to deny death. We just don't want to speak about it, talk about it. It's still a big taboo. We're getting better at it. So you would think theoretically, I think older people a little more prepared, but not necessarily. The same issues come up. It's the end, and that brings up a lot of fear and anxiety that we don't talk about enough. 25 or 85, it's always too soon.
I think that's why Cocoon was so meaningful. Even though there was a lot of whimsy in it, it touched on these really ubiquitous and difficult experiences.
And so much of art, as we all know, it expresses stuff that we know is true, but people don't always get access to in ordinary life. So we know from research, things like transcendence and meaning making are profoundly helpful in dealing with end-of-life distress, with existential issues. But who reads the literature, right? But through theater, movie, song, the stuff we surround ourselves with, art, when it expresses it in an art form, it's more accessible. This movie, other movies like it, how many songs do you know that deal with these issues? There's countless, right?
Yeah.
Books. So it really speaks to the art as a vehicle to get across important things for us as a species, not just a bunch of scientists doing research in a lab.
I'll tell you one thing personally about myself. I've been really lucky. I wanted to do something, and I found a way to do it, and do it well, and make a living at it, and
you are lucky.
Have a lot of fun, and enjoyed film. I do stage work, and I love that. So having done that, having set out to do something, and then doing it, and having done it successfully, and spent my life doing it, I don't worry about end of life. I really don't think about it. I expect one of these years or months reasonably to have a heart attack or whatever, or even if I go through that, my heart's pretty strong as it turns out. Something's going to happen to me in the next 4 or 5 years, for sure, and it's okay. I've had a hell of a life.
I don't even like hearing that. This speaks to how we don't want to talk about death. I don't like sitting here hearing you at 79 say something's going to happen to you in the next 4 or 5 years.
But the point is that I have no complaints.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be holding the carpet.
Because you feel like you lived a life well lived, and you're grateful.
You're given a certain amount of time, and if you're lucky, as I was, and you work hard, as I did, and you get pretty much what you want, which I was able to do, then what have you got to be about? It ends at some point.
Did you find meaning in your work as an artist?
Not in everything, but in certain things, tremendous meaning. I've been in the theater after a performance of Salesman when a guy, a businessman, obviously very successful, beautifully dressed, burst into my dressing room sobbing, his wife panic-stricken behind him trying to hold on to him. And he insisted that he had to talk to me. It turns out that he had a big problem with his son, which is what the play's all about. And so I had to talk to the guy. Now, I'm no therapist, and I kept trying to point that out, but he wanted to just, somehow I represented something to him.
And he wanted to connect and express
and
that.
things like that happen. You know, as an artist, as an actor, you have the ability, you have the opportunity, if not, if it doesn't work all the time, but all of a sudden something ignites in somebody and they see their life in a way that they hadn't seen it before. And in certain plays that has happened. And so for whatever it's worth, I mean, you have to consider that was the whole point of the play in the first place, was the act of illumination.
Do you think that's what we as humans want before we die? To know, I mean, as a psychologist, with what you've seen of mindsets, of lives well lived up until the end, is it to feel like we did something that mattered, that connected us to other people?
Yeah, that's borne out now in clinical research. I mean, to cultivate meaning and a sense of purpose and even a sense of transcendence at times, that's been linked with, that buffers against end-of-life distress. I mean, he just said, his words will quote, at times I had tremendous meaning. Yeah. A lot of people don't have that. And again, I come back to art as like almost serving the function that religion can serve. You know, religion kind of was generated around death and fear of death and what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And often art can communicate that stuff in ways that are so accessible. This guy runs in his dressing room, treating him like the shrink, looking for the answers, right? And Willie Loman ran out of road. I mean, Willie Loman is like so many people. He ran out of road in life and made a decision, but Willie Loman is not alone.
So many people think theater is church because it is communal. Well, it is extraordinary for the audience too to watch.
It's exactly church.
Yeah, it is.
It's exactly church because it's an experience, hopefully, that the assembly participates in, and the assembly gets up and walks out changed in some minor or major way.
To my count, you have died at least 9 times
on
screen. Yeah. In Gorky Park, Lee Marvin disemboweled you. In Silverado, Kevin Kline shot you. In Legal Eagles, you burned to death. Lawrence Fishburne stuck a grenade in your jacket. And in Tommy Boy, you died of a heart attack right in the middle of your own wedding. And then, of course, Death of a Salesman, Willie Loman.
Tommy Boy died right at the beginning of the picture, too. That was the worst part of it. I was in the first reel.
Has rehearsing death so many times changed your sense of it at all?
Well, the only thing is you got to hold your breath. And you got to really seriously hold your breath, you know, because the cameraman doesn't give a damn. He says, stop moving. Stop moving. All right, somebody hold his chest, will you? Because, you know, and you're saying, and the funny, you realize that when you look at something that's dead, it's different than looking at something that's alive.
But is that all that death is? Stopping moving?
No, it's not. But I mean, I'm not going to die for any part. Maybe I would these days. Give me a ring and we'll see. But no, but I mean, it's a funny thing about death. When something is dead, you know it. So even in the movies, when you see a dead body in the movies, the audience instinctively, intellectually understands that it's not dead.
Yeah.
Because when you see a newsreel and you see a dead body in it, you can see death. You can even on the screen you can see it. So it's a different thing. Thank God. I mean, I didn't want to die on stage, although I have,
right,
in another sense,
figuratively,
artistically.
Tony, do you, as a doctor, you were nodding along with Brian? Yeah. Is there something that seems to leave the body when death is there?
Oh yeah.
Well, let me jump back to the first part of the question, then the second part. The rehearsal is an important thing you said. It's interesting. In the psilocybin research, as strange as this may sound, many people in these extreme altered states, these mystical experiences, actually experience ego death, experience death and rebirth. That's not unique to the research. At the core of most religions is that death-rebirth process. There's a great line in a monastery in Greece, an old ancient monastery. It says, if you die before you die, then you won't die when you die. Meaning if you experience death, rebirth in this life, when you actually die, it'll be less anxiety-provoking. So that death, rebirth process and the experiences that we've seen with these participants has been profoundly helpful. regarding what happens after death, obviously, we don't know. But I think when you see, like you said, a body lying still versus a body in a casket, you know who's the dead one. It just feels very different.
Is ego death, that's such an evocative term, is that something that you all coined? Or is that a...
No,
is
it's
that
been
a...
around. It's been around, and it happens in this research. People experience, they don't die, obviously, in the research, but this sense of self.
And separateness, right?
Say again?
The sense of separateness dies.
Dies, and then, but you see those metaphors in all religions. To be born again. On and on. In every tradition, there's this sense of to lose the ego, to lose this sense of self, and reborn in kind of a maybe existential or spiritual way. But that death rebirth process can be a rehearsal, so it's interesting, the metaphor in acting as well.
As a very successful actor, and let's call a spade, a movie star. Do you see what we're talking about, this transcendent ego death in many of your colleagues?
One of the wisest pieces of wit, I guess, they ever heard, it must have been an Irishman who said it. He said, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. So,
Yeah.
all right, in that statement lies all of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, fear of death.
Whatever it is that exists after death, your instinct is to say, I'll wait. Mm-hmm. I'll find out then, if I have to. And
Brian, it sounds like your lack of fear of death comes in part from what you've described as gratitude for getting to live a life that you wanted to live. And I wonder, Tony, with you, do you have more of a lack of fear of death because you've witnessed people die with less anxiety as part of what you do for a living?
I will say that witnessing these experiences of our participants in these studies talk so eloquently about consciousness and physical death and what the nature of reality is, has affected me in positive ways. That we don't know everything. We know very little. What is consciousness? Where is consciousness? What is the true nature of self? These are the questions, the Zen Buddhists and the Christian mystics address, but science is now finally getting there. We were joking in the hallway before that it's the final frontier of science, death. This is the final frontier. What is death? What is consciousness? What is all this? And we don't know. And science is beginning to kind of poke around and try to understand it.
There are those people who have died. If you probably know way more about this than I do, and then come back.
Right.
Who see certain things, but who the hell knows what that's all about?
The remarkable thing with those people, so they're called near-death experiences. A scientist named Kenneth Ring does a lot of that research. The remarkable thing about that is the people who come back, who say they died, it was blissful, and it was incredible, and it was miraculous, and they're not afraid to die, but they still want to live here.
But they came
possible.
back.
Right, and they want to save every moment they have. They say, even though I know it's incredible what they experienced, this existence is incredible. Here. I want to suck up every last second. This is incredible. Look what we have here.
Yeah.
And so that's always touching. Even with this research, people who are dying of cancer say, I'm not afraid any longer, yet I still want to get every ounce out of this incredible thing we have here called life.
Jumping back to Cocoon, when Brian's character Walter invites the elderly humans to join him as immortal creatures of light, he tells them that in their new world they'll be both students and teachers. Walter knows that the humans, having faced death, have something that immortal, magical light creatures don't. So I guess the question for both of you is, do you think that the very fact that our lives end, that they're limited, creates a greater value on them?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you got a certain amount of time, and you better be aware of it, and you better be aware of the fact that not only do I have to do something that I want to do, that I really care about, you don't have to necessarily succeed at it. I mean, I know a lot of actors who are struggling all the time to be actors, but when they get a job, they do the best they can, and they give it. And great success is not guaranteed to everybody. But living well, living hard, living difficult, taking chances, busting your ass, that's anybody can do that. Anybody can. And there's enough of a payoff in that, especially if you're doing something you really care about. It's enough of a payoff for anybody.
And I agree. I think there's no doubt that death informs how we live. There's no doubt.
Oh, yeah.
Death is the greatest teacher.
It's time.
Period. Death is the greatest human teacher.
What really strikes me in hearing Brian talk about the power of artifice, that granted when you're, let's say, in the theater.
Yeah, artifice is a bad word,
Yeah,
but
no,
that's
it has
what
a
it is.
negative connotation,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter. It's still powerful, it's still connecting, and it's resonant. And with your psilocybin study, it is an illusion. They are under the influence of this very powerful drug. But nevertheless, even if it's an illusion, you can quibble with me about words,
I'm gonna
please
quibble.
do. No, please do. But it still has very real and
Right.
lasting effects.
Yes.
So please tell me
No,
what
well,
language I
someone-
should be using.
Well, someone says not even a drug study, because you take it once, you have this experience, and we don't know how it works. I mean, this chemical clearly alters consciousness in a way that some would say has this kind of access, this portal to some other level of consciousness where these truths have been written about for millennia. I mean, mystics have been saying these things for thousands of years. So it may not be an illusion, it may be actually some insight into some incredible nature of self. But yes, the profound gains are made in these experiences, as in the theater.
Right. I guess the lesson is it doesn't matter how you get there. It doesn't matter that you're not Willie Loman.
Right.
The experience is still real for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, you walk the theater. It's interesting. The theater, the church. You walk in, you sit down. It gets dark, lights come up, and something happens in 2 or 3 hours. And if it's the right thing, people are taken from the place where they are, taken to another place, and then brought back to where they.
That was the
Right.
point.
That's what you
Point
do.
of church. It was the point of religion.
Yeah.
The point of
Point of
church, point of
transport you.
theater,
Sure.
and it's a point of your
The
study.
scent, the incense, the stained glass windows, it was supposed to transport you out of this ordinary reality,
That's right.
the regular one, into a different state of consciousness. That's what theater does.
And when you come back, whether it's church or theater,
changed.
you're changed.
Does all of that make death more palatable?
That's the intention of it. To connect us with something more enduring, some more enduring truths within the human experience that art has done, that theater, that rock and roll, that spirituality helps us with, to connect with something more enduring.
Well, the funny thing about it is we all know, as human beings, who knows better than us, that there's the beginning of something, there's existence, there's a time in between, and there's an end. Why should it be any different for us? It's not. And as you get older, you approach the end. I mean, then you grab a hold of something that you care about, that you can do, like me acting, and you squeeze more out of it, as much as you can, because that's what you do and that's what you enjoy. Or you just go someplace and relax and watch TV, and I could do either one. I can still hit that channel changer. But the fact is, I would rather do the other. I'd rather see if I could get an extra base hit or two in the next 4 or 5 years. That's what I like to do.
But I love the idea of transportation, right? Like, not in the acting business or the music business, the transportation business, and moving. I mean, transport, really, literally
Yeah.
changing, coming back changed. And that's what religion used to do and should do, right? Transport us, change
Sure.
us. There's something else here. Versus this, one reality. That's the best of art, which I love this whole metaphor of art as a vehicle for change.
So if you all were some of those old folks in Cocoon at the end, given a chance to be transported into something unknown, but to remain immortal, what would you choose?
Well, it's easy to say. I would do what they did, which is to go. But it'd be something I'd have to think about, because I do believe in a beginning, a middle, and an end. I mean, it's what the theater's all about. And so I'm not so sure that I would say, yeah, take me. I have to think about that. That's a pass for now. I mean, probably the last day when I'm clawing at the sheets, I say, no, I changed my mind.
Beam
Changed
me
my
up.
mind. I'll go.
A good
Where's my
adventure.
ticket?
Take the ride, right? but it's true about this. Again, a lot of people are now talking about extending life, and we will. We're going to miss it. You'll make it. You're very young. We're going to miss these life extensions. Maybe we'll live to be 150. Who knows what will happen? But we're still going to pass away.
Yeah.
So these futurists who are
Inexorable.
obsessed with, we're never going to live forever. There has to be the end. The question is, what is the end?
Yeah.
And can we now talk about, is it the end? Is something, who knows what happens? But it's remarkable to speak about. And that's part of the goal of this new conversation in America. Let's talk about end of life. Let's talk about death. Let's talk about consciousness. What is this?
I can no longer be in denial that this is the end of the show.
No, we can't end the show. We need a part 2. We'll come back next week.
I would love
Next
it.
week, you're
I would,
in the
yes,
saloon. In the
encore,
saloon.
encore.
In the saloon now.
Absolutely. I'll meet you guys at the pub and you can tell me your Maureen
There are no
Stapleton
second
stories.
acts. There you go.
I cannot thank you enough for this fascinating conversation. Thank you for your insights. I think
He's a real smart guy.
He's a real smart guy. He's a kind guy. I speak for millions and millions of people. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your gifts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for this. We had a good time.
For all of you watching, be sure to check out our Science Goes to the Movies Facebook page for web-only clips and keep up with everything related to Science Goes to the Movies all in one place. And if you want to watch past episodes or download our new podcast, check us out at cuny.tv.